Vorelian Prime hung in the sky like a dying ember, its light weak and red. Around it, ships as large as cities moved in silent patterns, their metal hulls catching the dim glow. In the heart of this world, a grand building rose higher than the rest. It was the Imperium Senate, a place of power, law, and fear. Inside, the Senate floor was a circle of stone and steel. Alien leaders from 100 worlds filled the chamber, their strange forms gathered in high seats. Some had fur, some had scales, some shimmered like mist. At the center floated the Emperor's throne, a platform made of black metal and strange energy. On it sat Emperor Xoltherin, ruler of the Imperium. His many eyes blinked slowly, and his voice rumbled through the chamber. "Bring in the human." The order made the room fall silent. Even the air seemed to grow heavier. 2 guards entered, their armor shining with red lights. Between them walked a man. He was tall, with skin marked by bruises and cuts. His name was Elias Voss, the last human commander known to the galaxy. Heavy chains bound his arms, and a collar of light wrapped around his neck, pulling him forward. But Voss did not lower his head. His eyes, though bloodshot, burned with a sharp, stubborn light. Every step echoed in the vast chamber. The senators watched him with a mix of hate and curiosity. Some whispered, others spat on the floor. He stopped in the center of the room. "Commander Elias Voss," the Emperor spoke, "you stand accused of treason, rebellion, and crimes against the Imperium. How do you answer these charges?" Voss looked up, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. His voice was rough from hours of silence, but clear. "You forgot murder. I killed a dozen of your enforcers on Grathus 9. A low murmur spread through the Senate. It was not the words themselves, but the way he spoke them, without fear, without apology. The Emperor's gaze narrowed. "Your crimes doomed your people. The last of your kind will be wiped away, and your name will be erased from the records." Voss tilted his head, as if considering this. "Funny thing about humans," he said, "we tend to leave marks you can't erase." The senators shifted, some glancing toward one another. Not since the ancient wars had a human spoken in this hall. Not since Earth itself was burned. From a seat high above, Senator Aritha Vel watched carefully. She kept her face still, but inside her thoughts raced. She had waited for this moment, for this man. He was reckless, angry, and dangerous. But she needed him. Voss stood alone in the circle of light, his chains clinking softly. Outside, the dying star shed its last light. Inside, something was about to change. Something no one could stop. The great chamber of the Imperium Senate was quiet. The air was thick with tension. Dozens of alien leaders sat in their high seats, staring down at the human standing alone in the center. Commander Elias Voss stood still, chains heavy around his wrists, but his eyes sharp and steady. A tall figure with green, scaly skin rose from his seat. His voice hissed as he spoke. "This creature dares to mock the Imperium," he said. "It should be broken and tossed into the void." Others around him nodded or banged their staffs in agreement. The sound echoed through the hall. The Emperor raised one hand, and the room fell silent again. His many eyes watched Voss carefully. "You may speak your final words, human," the Emperor said, his voice deep and cold. "But choose them wisely. No one leaves this floor alive once the sentence is passed." Voss rolled his shoulders as much as the chains allowed. He looked around at the strange faces watching him, some hateful, some cold, and a few unsure. Then he smiled, a crooked, tired smile. "Final words, huh?" he said. "All right." His voice wasn't loud, but every word carried through the chamber. "I look at this room, and I see cowards. You call yourselves rulers of the stars, but you hide behind laws you twist to suit yourselves. You pretend to be wise, but you destroy whole worlds because they frighten you." A few senators growled, but no one spoke. "You're afraid of us," Voss went on. "You always were. You didn't wipe us out because we were weak. You did it because we wouldn't kneel, because humans fight back, because when we fall, we get up again. And when we get up, we make you bleed." The room rippled with uneasy whispers. No one had spoken like this in generations. Not here. Not to the Emperor. From her seat, Senator Aritha Vel watched him closely. There was no sign of fear in the human's voice. Even now, with death waiting, he spoke like a soldier standing on a broken wall. The Emperor's voice rose. "Enough. Your words are dust. Your people are finished. The last of your colonies will burn by week's end." Voss gave a small shrug. "Maybe. Maybe not. Thing is, you lot are so used to hearing yes, you forgot what no sounds like." For a moment, the chamber was dead silent. The tension cracked like glass. Then, without moving her face, Senator Vel made a tiny hand sign to one of her aides. A message left the chamber in secret. Voss's words had done what she hoped, rattled the Emperor, stirred the Senate, and lit a spark in the dark. Outside the walls of Vorelian Prime, warships drifted in silence. A storm was coming. No one could stop it now. The Senate chamber emptied slowly after the trial ended for the day. Some senators left in silence. Others spoke in angry whispers. The Emperor's floating throne had vanished through a hidden doorway, leaving the room cold and still. Commander Elias Voss remained in a holding cell below the chamber, his wrists still bound by metal cuffs that hummed with power. The cell was small and dim, with walls of dark stone. 2 guards stood at the door, tall and silent in their armor. Voss sat on a bench, his back against the wall. The chain around his ankles rattled every time he moved. But his eyes stayed sharp, watching every corner of the room. A soft sound made the guards turn. A figure stepped through the doorway. It was Senator Aritha Vel. She wore dark robes and a calm face, though her eyes held a sharp light. One guard moved to stop her, but she raised a small device, and the cuffs around Voss's wrists flickered for a brief moment. The guard stepped aside, unsure but unwilling to disobey a senator. Vel spoke first, her voice low. "You made quite a mess up there." Voss didn't rise. He simply met her gaze. "You'll have to be more specific," he said. She moved closer, careful to stay in the shadows. The guards watched, but neither spoke. "The Emperor plans to wipe out the last human colonies," Vel said. "He gave the order 2 days ago, before this trial began." Voss's jaw tightened. His people were scattered across a few broken worlds, and old ships hiding in empty space. If the Imperium struck now, there would be no one left. "Why tell me?" he asked. "Because I need you alive," she replied. "And because you're the only one who can help me stop him." Voss gave a short, bitter laugh. "Me? Chained in a cell. No fleet. No army." Vel leaned in slightly. "You have something better," she said. "A name. A story. You made them remember today, Voss. No one has spoken to the Emperor like that in generations, and no one will forget it." Voss studied her, trying to see what lay behind her calm words. She wasn't a friend. She wasn't doing this out of kindness. "What's in it for you?" Her voice stayed cold. "The Emperor's power grows too fast. If he wipes out your people, he'll turn on the Senate next. I need the Imperium to crack. You'll be the hammer." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Voss nodded once. "Fine," he said. "But if I'm going to die, it won't be in chains." Vel reached into her cloak and placed a small device beside him. It was no bigger than a coin, but it hummed with quiet energy. "Your first tool," she said. "Use it when the time comes." Then she turned and left, her steps soft against the stone. The guards closed the door, and the cell fell silent again. Voss held the device in his hand, feeling its weight. The storm was coming, and he was ready. Commander Elias Voss sat alone in his cell. The small device Senator Vel had left rested in his palm. It looked like a plain metal coin, but when he pressed it, a tiny blue light flickered. It gave off a soft hum, barely louder than a whisper. He turned it over between his fingers and let his mind wander. Old memories came back, uninvited but sharp as broken glass. He saw the faces of his people, scattered across dying ships and half-buried colonies. He remembered the long nights hiding from Imperium patrols, the cold meals in underground shelters, and the stories told by firelight. Stories about Earth. It was a planet none of them had ever seen. It was gone before he was born, turned to ash by the Imperium in a war so old most aliens barely spoke of it now. But the stories stayed. Stories about a place with blue skies, green forests, and seas that stretched forever. Stories about a people who never knew when to stop fighting. Voss could still hear his mother's voice in his memory. She used to say, "Never bow, Elias. Never forget where you come from." The door to his cell slid open with a low hiss. A figure entered, one of Vel's agents. The man was thin, with sharp eyes and quick hands. He didn't speak at first, just glanced at the guards outside, then back at Voss. "Message from the senator," the agent said quietly. "It's time." Voss stood slowly. The chains on his ankles rattled as he moved. The agent pulled a small object from his coat, a set of old grav tether shackles. The device could shift weight, bend gravity around it, and pull objects like they were nothing. Ancient human tech, banned by the Imperium long ago. Voss took it and strapped it around his wrist. It was old and scratched, but it hummed to life at his touch. A small display blinked green. The agent gave a short nod. "You'll know when." Without another word, the man slipped out of the cell. Voss sat back down and stared at the grav tether. It felt strange in his hand, like holding a piece of old Earth. He let his mind drift again, this time to the promise he made to the last elder of his people before leaving the colonies. "If I fall standing." He closed his eyes for a moment. Outside the thick walls of the Imperium Senate, the dying star of Aurelian Prime cast weak, red light across the city. Ships moved in silence above, and somewhere out in the dark, his people waited, hoping for a sign. Voss opened his eyes and fastened the grav tether tight. The time for waiting was over. One way or another, this would end soon. And when it did, they would remember. The next morning, the Imperium Senate gathered once more. The great hall was packed with alien leaders, tall, thin beings with skin like stone, short creatures with many arms, shimmering shapes that barely looked solid. They sat in their high seats, eyes fixed on the center of the room. The Emperor's floating throne returned, silent and dark. Emperor Xoltherin sat upon it, his many eyes watching everything. His long, sharp fingers tapped the side of his seat. He spoke only one word. "Bring him." The doors opened, and Commander Elias Voss was led into the chamber. This time, his head was held high. His ankles were still chained, but his steps were steady. The grav tether hidden beneath his sleeve hummed softly, unnoticed by the guards. Voss reached the center and faced the throne. The Emperor's voice rolled out like thunder. "This council finds you guilty. Your sentence is death." The senators cheered. Staffs banged against stone. Some creatures let out shrieks of victory. Only a few faces remained still. Among them, Senator Aritha Vel, her eyes locked on Voss. But Voss didn't flinch. He waited, then spoke. "Before you end me," he said, "I want to say something." The Emperor laughed, a deep, cruel sound. "Words are wind, human." "Funny thing about wind," Voss said. "It spreads fire." Before anyone could react, Voss raised his arm and triggered the grav tether. A pulse of invisible force shot forward, yanking the Emperor's floating throne out of the air like it weighed nothing. The massive seat crashed onto the Senate floor with a heavy thud. The chamber exploded into chaos. Some senators shouted. Others dove for cover. Guards raised their weapons, but Vel's agents were already moving. A small group hidden among the crowd drew pulse blades and fired stun bursts into the guards. Voss moved fast. The grav tether whined as he dragged the Emperor, throne and all, across the Senate floor. The heavy seat scraped against the stone, sending sparks into the air. "This is what happens when you forget who we are," Voss shouted, his voice rising over the noise. The sight of a lone human pulling the Emperor through the chamber froze many in place. No one had seen anything like it. In that moment, the image struck deep into the minds of every leader watching. The Senate, once so sure of its power, now stared at a man who refused to die quietly. Voss dropped the throne in front of the senators' seats. "You should have finished us when you had the chance," he said. The room was still for a breath. Then a blaster bolt hissed through the air. Voss ducked, the shot grazing the wall behind him. Vel's agents opened fire, and the chamber erupted in battle. Above, outside the city, human ships waiting in the dark powered up their engines. It had begun. Blaster fire lit up the Senate chamber. Bright streaks of energy zipped through the air. Guards shouted orders, some diving for cover while others raised their weapons. The sound of weapons clashing echoed against the stone walls. Commander Elias Voss moved fast, ducking behind a fallen statue as bolts of light burned past him. His grav tether hummed on his wrist. Still charge. Around the room, Senator Aritha Vel's agents fought with quick, sharp strikes. Their blades cut through the Emperor's guards with clean sweeps, and their stun weapons dropped others where they stood. Smoke filled the chamber. On his fallen throne, Emperor Xoltharin snarled. His many eyes glared as he struggled to lift the heavy seat. A blast scorched the floor beside him, forcing him to duck. The Emperor had ruled the Imperium for decades, but now his power meant nothing without loyal guards at his side. Voss rose from his cover and fired a stolen blaster. One shot struck a guard in the shoulder, spinning the creature to the floor. He sprinted toward the Emperor, dodging fallen debris and angry shouts. Senator Vel appeared beside him, blood on her sleeve, a pulse blade in hand. "The council chambers are sealed," she said quickly. "We have a few minutes before reinforcements arrive." Voss nodded. "Then we finish this now." Together, they moved toward the Emperor's throne. More guards came rushing from the far doors, but Vel's agents blocked their path. The chamber turned into a storm of flashing light, smoke, and shouts in a dozen alien tongues. Voss reached the throne and pointed his blaster at the Emperor's head. "Time's up, Xoltharin." The Emperor hissed, his eyes narrowing. "Kill me, and you'll burn with the rest of your kind." Voss didn't move his finger from the trigger. "We've been burning a long time," he said. But before he fired, Vel stopped him. "Wait. Alive, he's more useful. The Senate follows strength. Show them he bleeds." Voss hesitated, then lowered the weapon. "Fine, but he walks." The agents dragged the Emperor out of the throne and forced him to his knees in front of the Senate seats. The remaining senators watched in silence, their faces pale, their eyes wide. No one spoke. No one dared. Voss looked around at them. "This is what happens when you forget who you're ruling," he said, his voice carrying through the chamber. Outside, the first tremors rocked the city as human ships began their attack. Flashes of light filled the sky. Alarms howled through the streets. Voss turned to Vel. "Get your people ready. The city's ours by nightfall." She gave a sharp nod, wiping dust from her brow. "It's already begun." The storm Voss had promised was here, and nothing could stop it now. The city of Vorelion Prime trembled under the weight of the assault. Human ships, sleek and fast, cut through the skies, their engines roaring like distant thunder. Explosions echoed from the city's outskirts as the first wave of fighters and bombers hit their targets. The Imperial defense systems were swift but chaotic, struggling to respond to the unexpected attack. On the Senate floor, Commander Elias Voss stood over the Emperor, his blaster still drawn. Emperor Xoltharin knelt before him, his pride shattered, his body bruised and bloodied. The alien ruler's many eyes flicked nervously toward the massive windows above the chamber, where the flashing lights of the battle outside reflected off the dark glass. Senator Aritha Vel stepped forward, her voice cold but urgent. "This will not be enough," she said, her eyes narrowing as she watched the Emperor. "The Senate is already dividing. Some are preparing to escape." Voss glanced at her. "They'll run the moment they think they're safe." That's why you need to lead them, she replied. Now is the time. You've got their attention. The room was filled with uneasy whispers as the senators exchanged worried looks. The Empire had never been challenged like this. None of them knew what to do. The walls that had stood for so long were crumbling, and no one knew who would rise from the ruins. Voss took a deep breath, his hand steady on his blaster. I didn't come here to play politics, he said, his voice clear. But if you want to save yourselves, you'll listen to me. Vel stepped closer to the Emperor, her eyes hard. You want to save your empire? She asked the Emperor. Help us end this war before it destroys everything you've built. Zoltharin's voice was a low growl. You think I'll work with you, human? You've already humiliated me. Voss's smile was grim. I don't need your pride, Emperor. I need your authority. The Emperor's eyes burned with hatred, but he said nothing. He knew the situation had shifted. He no longer held the power he once did. Outside, the battle was reaching its peak. The human fleet, using the chaos to their advantage, struck fast and without warning. Imperial ships were disabled, falling from the sky in bursts of light. The ground shook again, and the sounds of war grew louder, closer. Vel turned to the senators, her voice rising above the noise. This is your choice, she said. Help us fight back, or your empire will fall. You've seen the power of the humans. They won't stop until they get what they want. One by one, the senators shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The walls of their power were crumbling. Some began to rise, nodding to each other, while others hesitated, fear settling into their hearts. Voss raised his hand and addressed the room. This is the moment. Decide quickly, because once the next wave hits, we won't have time for second chances. The tension was thick, the sound of explosions echoing outside like the drums of war. Everything was about to change. The Senate chamber had never felt more alive. The tension in the air crackled, thick with uncertainty. Outside, the sounds of battle continued to grow louder, the city of Vorelian Prime under siege. Human ships blazed through the skies, lighting up the night. Explosions echoed through the streets, sending shockwaves that rattled the walls of the chamber. Commander Elias Voss stood in the center, his eyes scanning the room of senators. Some looked hesitant, unsure of what to do. Others had already begun to rise from their seats, their minds made up. A few still clung to their loyalty to the Emperor, but they were fewer with each passing moment. Emperor Zoltharin knelt before Voss, his many eyes filled with a mix of rage and fear. He had never imagined being in such a position. Powerless, humiliated, his empire crumbling around him. His once mighty reign now seemed fragile, like glass ready to shatter. You still have a choice, Emperor, Voss said, his voice low but firm. Help us, and your people might survive. Refuse, and they will fall with you. Zoltharin sneered, his pride not yet broken entirely. You think I'll bow to you, human? I have ruled this galaxy for centuries. I have crushed worlds beneath my heel. You're not crushing anyone now, Voss replied, his tone sharp. Your empire is burning. Your people are dying. You can save them, or you can die with them. The room was silent for a moment, the senators waiting to see what the Emperor would do. Zoltharin's many eyes flicked nervously to the other leaders in the room. He could feel the change in the air. Some of the senators were no longer afraid of him. They had seen the humans rise, heard the stories of their resilience, their fire, and now they were starting to believe that this might be the end of the Imperium. Senator Vel stepped forward, her voice steady but urgent. You see, Emperor, it's not about you anymore. It's about what's left. Your people are scattered. Your fleets are falling apart. It's time to decide what you want your legacy to be. The Emperor glared at her, then at Voss, then back at the room of senators. He was cornered, his options running out. For the first time in years, the Emperor spoke without arrogance. His voice was quiet, almost defeated. What do you want from me? He asked, his eyes looking down at the floor, not daring to meet Voss's gaze. Voss stepped closer, his hand still gripping the blaster at his side. "Your authority," he said. "Your empire is done. But if you're smart, you'll help us end this. Help us bring down the ones who would burn your people for good." There was a long pause. The room was so still that it felt like the entire world had stopped moving. Then, finally, the Emperor nodded, his voice resigned. "You have it," he said. "Do what you must." And in that moment, the fate of the Imperium changed forever. The Emperor, once the ruler of everything, now stood as an ally to those who had once been his enemies. The senators, divided and fearful, began to move, some toward Voss and his cause, while others scrambled for the escape they knew was already slipping from their reach. The battle outside was not over, but the tide had turned. Voss knew this was only the beginning, the end of an empire, and the rise of something new.